Okay, and welcome to today's the Times, the Customs recordings, coming live from the Isle of Man, where we are wasting time once more. We're having another look at the absurdities of modern life and how we all deal with them. In front of you is a radar, a primitive radar, which has been the source of much controversy here on the Isle of Man. And this links into what I'm going to talk about today, which is the easy ride that the science and technology industries get by society at large. Now, I'm going to start with the mother of all, if you like, sectors within the science and technology genre, and that's the space, space in general. I've nothing against the concept of space exploration. Don't blame them for having to go back in the early days, but surely after a couple of exploratory missions it should have been blatantly obvious to anyone that even with the option of spending an unlimited amount of money, absolutely nothing of any use for mankind would come of space exploration. That's pretty much what has occurred when the myth, propaganda and rhetoric has been stripped away. NASA, who are by no means the only culprits, but are probably the main ones, have had a darn good go at spending the unlimited amounts of money bit, and quelle surprise, 65 years later, the sum total of their efforts is some inedible vacuum pack sweets and the suspension forks of the Rally Activator mountain bike. A pretty poor return, it has to be said, in anyone's language. But what about satellite TV? What about weapons technology? What about your iPhone? What about the internet? What about your sat-nav, I hear you cry? Now, I'm not suggesting that space has hindered those sort of technological advances. It has probably helped in a roundabout way, but to suggest the only reason I can sit down and watch Sky Sports Super Sunday on a Sunday afternoon in my lounge is because we have spent the last 50 years launching rockets into space at the cost of many, many, many trillions of pounds is pretty laughable even to the biggest non-scientist. And when this is put to those that champion the whole science movement, they sort of mumble, murmur, go bright red and say, well, I don't really care what you or anyone else says, space is cool, isn't it? And of course that is the nub of what is really at the heart of it all. We as society are absolutely obsessed with this perception of being smart, forward thinking, earnest and all those types of things, that we lose sight of the reality of what is actually going on. And this, in a nutshell, is how the space industry has been allowed to continue despite no tangible demonstration of success. Indeed, success isn't really expected. As long as we keep getting some grainy pictures of some rocks from the surface of Mars and some zany videos of astronauts upside down floating around frying up a pan of beans, then everyone is happy. For example, I was in the pub the other night, my drinking partner turned to me and said, wow, did you see on the internet the other night there were some grainy pictures of some rocks that were all red and rock-like from the surface of Mars. It looked really cool. I said, well, no I didn't. If you find it cool, great. I would ask the simple question, what on earth does this mean for you, me and the rest of the human race? We have these pictures, but so what? He replied and turned and sort of scratched his chin, looked a bit embarrassed and said, well, I don't know, lol, it's some rocks from Mars, I guess, lol, but how cool is that? Again, I rest my case, that is the level we're at. It doesn't really matter that all these space missions are an absolute waste of time. It doesn't matter about the grotesque amounts of money we're spending on them. As long as some science geeks can keep up their well-paid back office job, politicians have a vanity project and highbrow types have the Hubble telescope to waffle on about in pubs and at dinner parties, then it's a case of crack on, boys. Don't worry about the money, we've got this one covered. Now, of course, I've given space there, I've taken space to task, I've put it to the sword. It's actually just an extension of the easy ride that the whole science and tech sectors are afforded. Several strands to this. I'll give you an example. Again, the other night I was sat in the pub. My friend comes marching in holding a copy of the Express. He says, "Look at this, Dreamberry, page 45. Finally, what I've been saying all along. We can eat fatty food. It's got good fats in us. Processed meat is alright. It says here, scientists have said it's okay." I said, "Great news." He says, "Yeah, I know. We can all head down to McDonald's now and stuff our face after we finish drinking. The Big Macs are on me." I then said a word of caution. May I ask who the scientists are that are involved in this and where their funding came from? He says, "I don't know, who cares? It's scientists, they've said it's okay, we're all alright to rock." I said, "Well, do you mind if I read on?" I get to the bottom of the article and it says that the scientists were a collection of experts funded by the British Red Meat Delegation. I said, "Oh dear, there may be a conflict of interest there." He said, No, it's scientists, they're always neutral, we're alright to stuff our faces." And that in a nutshell is the problem. People cannot see that when science makes a definitive discovery or statement that it is 9 times out of 10 funded by an interested party. The sort of evidence is concocted and a sort of pre-stated result, if you like, or conclusion has already been decided, and the money is put towards scientists basically faffing around, making up statistics and drawing graphs, much like any undergraduate dissertation project at any time in Britain over the last 200 years. That is science in a nutshell. It is not impartial or neutral. It is funded by a interested party. Of course, even more perverse, if you like, is the public funded studies. Now, I have no problem with a lot of these. The world's top boffins working on medical discoveries or inventing the internet, or finding genuine improvements to all our lives is great. That is where science is great. There is no disputing that. For example, I could lose my leg in a nasty accident. Within a couple of weeks I could have a prosthetic limb fitted and I could function pretty much as normal. I could even enter the Special Olympics and enter a running race with a guy who thinks he's a chicken and a blind chap who's wandering into my lane who looks a bit like Data from Star Trek. That is great. What I have an issue with is the lack of checks and safeguarding as to the studies that our taxpayers' money is going towards. It seems to me that universities, the world's top boffins, technological institutes have a free rein of what they research, and it's potluck whether it is of use to mankind or not. As I've said, inventions of prosthetic limbs are great. 10-year studies into the funding, into looking at why grass is green or why water is wet is not a particularly good use of taxpayer money. Dropping sort of studies into heart disease is not a good thing to sort of spend the whole day pissing about, 10 years in fact, pissing about in bathtubs of water, going, "Oh yes, this is wet, lol." We then get a 400,000 page report into it, millions wasted, and scientists conclude that water is wet because it is, lol. It gets a half a paragraph on page 56 of the Express, and people turn around and say, "Oh right, great, thanks for that, we knew that all along," and the world carries on as normal. The scientists involved just say, "Great, well, we've conducted some science, we've done our job, it's all great." The conclusions don't really matter. The fact is, we have undertaken some science, and people just love science because, as I've said, it proves that we are forward thinking and earnest and all those types of things. And the final issue I have with it all, of which there are many, is the complete lack of professional performance from scientists, i.e. they do actually get things wrong a lot of the time. For example, I well remember back in the mid-90s, a rather sweaty bloke coming in from the Green Party telling us that absolutely definitely there is no two ways about this. In the year 2020, we will run out of oil and the world will cease to exist how we know it. We therefore need to come up with some new ways of existing without oil, because it simply won't exist. We need to get on with new renewable technology now, i.e. the mid-90s, and by the year 2000 it needs to be in full swing, otherwise the world will cease to exist and we are all going to die. I, like many other kids, were actually sort of quite scared by what he said. It was a definitive statement that the world would run out of oil in 2020. Now, here we are in 2019, and as far as I know, we are not going to run out of oil in the next 7 months. Therefore, and of course, he wasn't the only one. A lot of people were saying this back in the mid-90s, we are going to run out of oil. He was in fact wrong. We have found a lot of oil. We are continuing to find a lot of oil, and therefore he is wrong. He made a definitive statement saying that the world will run out of oil in 2020. He is wrong. Now, you know, the world has invested in renewable technology, rightly or wrongly. But the fact is, a lot of this was funded and acted upon on this wrong information. We are going to run out of oil. They were wrong. Now, when this is put to them, scientists just shrug their shoulders and say, well, that's science, isn't it? New technology, new discoveries, new things keep occurring in science all the time. That's science for you, lol. There's no sort of sackings, there's no sort of rubbishings of reputations. Scientists are allowed to continue. In fact, they are often promoted and set to task on a new study into the very thing they rubbished in the first place and were completely wrong about. Balmy. You know, for example, if a bus driver continues to drive the wrong way, you know, down a one-way street every week because he thinks it's the right way to go, he will be sacked. If a chef continues to cook up the wrong dish for his customers, he will be sacked. If a bank teller keeps putting money into the wrong account, he will be sacked. But scientists are not sacked. They are just, you know, given a free pass because it's science. Now, I've waffled on there enough about science. Needless to say, it frustrates me at the easy ride they get, but nothing will be done about it, because at the nub of it all, we all like to be seen as intelligent and down with technology, and that's the nub of it, and it's rather irritating. So I hope this radar conks out, just despite them all really, but it's keeping going for now.